Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys here this morning. Welcome to everyone here at the temple, and welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group, where we study the original words of the Buddha, helping you guys to understand the path to enlightenment. We start our class with a meditation, so I'll guide you in meditation first, and then I'll explain to you later what the Pali Canon and English study group is, and we can actually do that together to help you guys to learn what the Buddha taught to move the mind to the enlightened mental state. Just first, what enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. And this is accomplished through training of the mind. So that's why we use meditation to help you train your mind. And there's other teachings that you need besides meditation. So you can actually eliminate your anger. You don't have to live with anger for the rest of your life. Same thing with stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings. You can eliminate all of that by uprooting the causes and conditions that are producing it within your own mind. But when you're eliminating these pollutions out of the mind, you'll notice not only do you eliminate discontent feelings, but you also eliminate any kind of lack of concentration or anything like this. You'll have focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory because the mind will be performing optimally. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships will really improve and they'll really blossom. So if you have any kind of bitterness or hostility or argumentative nature in your relationships, you can actually transform this so that you're no longer doing those things. And you'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood anymore. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're always in a good mood. So these are just some of the benefits of getting to enlightenment, and meditation is part of what we use in order to train the mind to get to this enlightened mental state that you can experience in this life. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start this is I start with some chanting. We use chanting in order to ease the mind into meditation. If you would like to see these chants, they're on a laminated sheet over there on the table. They're in the Pali language. You're welcome to get one if you'd like at any time. There's the Pali chants, and then there's the English translations there too. You can even chant along as we're chanting. The Buddha never taught any rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship. He didn't teach prayer, so this isn't any kind of prayer or anything like that. He didn't teach a bunch of beliefs or rules and commandments, so you're not believing your way to enlightenment. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, so that every 2 weeks they would recite his teachings word for word because he taught orally. Nowadays, we don't need to chant in order to remember the teachings because we have books and audiobooks and videos and podcasts and things like this, but we still chant as a way to ease the mind into meditation. I suspect that the Buddha didn't actually create these chants himself, because if you notice, the chants have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect towards the Buddha. There's a lot of admiration here in these chants. A Buddha doesn't walk around and teach other people to chant things like this to them. Instead, they're just going to share their teachings to help people move to this enlightened mental state. And as they do, people start experiencing more and more peace and more joy in the mind. And the Buddha didn't want anything from his students. He didn't ask anything from them. He didn't expect anything from them. So when they were learning and practicing his teachings and moving from this anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to this enlightened mental state of peace and joy, they had a lot of respect and appreciation and gratitude for him because he just shared out of the kindness of his heart. So if you ever learned from somebody that helped you accomplish that particular thing where you move to enlightenment and your mind's peaceful and joyful, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So these chants, they're not a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer. There's nothing mystical or magical that's happening here. What we're doing is we're just concentrating the mind. We're focusing the mind. We're bringing some awareness to the mind and the breath to ease into meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So you're welcome to chant along if you like. After the chanting, I'm going to share some guidance so that while we're meditating, you'll actually hear me guiding you and we'll actually be meditating together. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet. I won't be teaching. I won't be sharing the guidance. All of us here at the temple will be meditating, and those of us online that you guys are joining us, we'll just all be meditating together. And surely you're going to hear occasional sounds, right? You can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. You're going to need to get used to not having this craving for permanence and wanting things to be a permanent way, because everything around you is impermanent and constantly changing. So you can't be in an environment that's permanently quiet. It's just not possible. So when you hear a sound or you hear different things like a car going by or maybe a dog barking or a bird chirping, you can just understand this is impermanence. This is the nature of the world, and you can just train your mind to focus on the breath. After that period of time where it's quiet and we're just meditating together, then we'll come out of the meditation with some chanting. And then that's where I'll start the class and helping you guys learn the teachings of the Buddha. In terms of your body positioning, to give you guys a couple of pointers on this, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught for meditation because your body can't be in the same position permanently. It's just not possible. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. Oftentimes people are learning in the seated position, so I'll give you some guidance on that. You might be sitting on the floor in a chair. At home, you might be on a sofa or a bench or a wheelchair or something like this. If you're sitting on the floor, which is very common, you might have a cushion under your rear and maybe lightly cross your legs. You're not interested in your legs being real tight. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This is also something that people like to do because it gets the hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. It's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way. It's about you finding what's comfortable for you. So if you like your legs lightly crossed and sitting on the mat, or no mats at all, or having your feet off the mat, it's totally up to you. Just make your lower body comfortable. The hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. And if this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way, because this isn't possible. We all have different bodies. So some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. You might even rest your hands comfortably in your lap. So just find whatever's comfortable for you and decide for yourself. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull and lethargic. But if you were real rigid with the upper body, your mind could be overactive or uptight. So you like the upper body to be in the middle, where the sternum's up and the shoulders back. This will keep the mind attentive and alert during your meditation. It also helps you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose, having some nice, consistent breaths. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along in, and then I'm going to come back with some guidance on meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Potang Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวาปานุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and the hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in naturally through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโพตังมหาเกวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวาปานุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys. Welcome to our class today. Those of you guys that are here at the temple and everyone that's joining us online, welcome to everyone. As I mentioned, today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the original words of the Buddha, helping students to understand the path to enlightenment. Just a little bit of something that will help you guys, those of you guys that are your first time here. If you need to use the restroom or anything like that, there's a bathroom in the back of the room. The very last door on the right, you're welcome to get up and use that at any time. There's even bathrooms outside. If you go outside to the parking lot, you'll see signs that take you around to the main temple bathroom. There's larger bathrooms out there. You're welcome to go use those at any time. We even have water and snacks here provided by our students that you're welcome to help yourself to and make yourself comfortable. In terms of this Pali Canon and English study group, what the teachings of the Buddha are about is to help you train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. While meditation is important, and you're going to need to meditate in order to get to enlightenment, you wouldn't be able to just meditate and only get to enlightenment. You're going to need to study his teachings, understanding them thoroughly so that you can learn them, examine them, and investigate them. And then as you're starting to intellectually understand them, you start to reflect on them to independently verify his teachings of whether they're true or whether they're false. And then you start practicing his teachings. You integrate them into your life. And what you're doing is you're training your mind. The Buddha discovered these 10 individual pollutions in the mind. They're referred to as the 10 fetters. or the 10 pollutions or taints or defilements. And when you uproot these out of your mind with the training that he provides you, this is where you'll experience the peace, the calmness, the serenity, the contentedness, and the joy. You'll eliminate all those discontent feelings that I mentioned, like the anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. You'll get to the point where your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming. And because you've eliminated this pollution out of your mind, that's why you experience the focus and the concentration and the clarity and the deep memory. So what we do in this Pali Canon English study group is we study the original words of the Buddha. Oftentimes students come into this program after they've studied in one of our foundational programs, like the group learning program, which is on Sunday and Wednesday, or our Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course, which is on the first week of every single month. It's a 5-day course where people study the original teachings of the Buddha, helping to develop a foundation. We have various courses and retreats throughout the year. Everything's available to you at no cost, whether it's the books or the audiobooks, the videos, the podcasts, even personal guidance and courses and retreats. You can receive the books that we study as part of this program through downloading them from our website. You can go to Buddha Daily Wisdom, and they're all available at no cost. You can also get printed versions by taking that file and go print it if you like, or you can get printed versions here at the temple, just reimbursing us for the printing cost. And they're also on Amazon as well. In the group learning program and all the other foundational programs, I'm helping students walking through in a traditional style of learning where I'm teaching for like 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I open up to questions that students have. And then I teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes and open up to questions that students have. And this is the way that students will typically first start when they're first learning the teachings of the Buddha. And then what we do in that program is we go through this first book. It's called Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, where volume 1 of this book series, it takes us 7 months to gradually walk you through this chapter by chapter every Sunday. And you can join here at the temple, or you can join in our live stream through Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, or if you can't even attend the live class, you can watch the recordings to be able to help you. And then after students develop a nice foundation in either one of our courses or retreats or that group learning program, they will tend to come into this program where they're getting more details and filling out their framework of understanding the teachings of the Buddha. And in this particular program, what we do is we go through volumes 2 through 13. This is volume 2. We actually just restarted this program last week. And in volume 2, this week, we're going to be studying chapters 11 through chapters 20. We probably won't have time in this particular class to do all 10, but that's typically what we'll do in our various times that we meet on Saturdays. And I do this at 9 a.m. in the morning and 9 p.m. at night from home. And people can actually join the live stream from home. And when I do it from home, I make sure I do all 10 chapters. Where here, we sometimes just study 3 or 4 chapters, depending on what it is that we've got going on in the class and what questions we have. So the way that we do this program is I have the teachings of the Buddha here on the screen, and those of you guys online, you guys can see this as well. And what I do is I invite a student to read the chapter, and the student will read either here at the temple or someone online through Zoom. If you would like to read the chapter, you can just volunteer by raising your hand. And here at the temple, if you could use a microphone in order to read, because that way we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. We have microphones in this white bowl. All you need to do is get one, press the gray button. The lights will come on. You just wait for a second or two, and then you just hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. If you were talking here at the temple without a microphone, they wouldn't be able to hear you online. And for those of you guys online, you can just electronically raise your hand in Zoom and then unmute your mic, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you throughout our live stream as well. And then after someone reads, then I will share about 5 or 10 minutes of teachings on that particular chapter to help you guys understand what it is and what the Buddha is teaching. His teach is very clear, very concise, and very precise, but it's helpful to have a teacher to guide you through and helping you to learn and understand. And then after I share the teaching, then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have, either here at the temple or online. And again, if you guys could use the microphones for any questions here, or if you're online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that and answer your question. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So as I was mentioning at the very beginning, the teachings of the Buddha, they're not a bunch of beliefs. They're not rules and commandments. He's guiding you and helping you to understand what it took for him to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. He's guiding you to be able to understand that so that you can learn, you can examine and investigate his teachings, you can reflect on them to independently verify them, and then you can practice them. And the beauty about this is because you're learning now, reflecting now, and practicing now, you see the results now in this life. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs that you believe a bunch of things and then hope something good happens when you die. That's not what he did. Instead, he's teaching you how to awaken the mind to the wisdom of what's referred to as the natural laws of existence. And these natural laws are something that's affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And just like the natural law of gravity affected all of us, and we struggled and made unwise decisions, we fell down, we hurt ourselves as a child, we really struggled with these decisions and this natural law. The same thing is occurring with the natural laws of existence, that the Buddha is teaching you how the world functions. He's not teaching you the way the world should be. He's teaching you the way the world is. And when you understand the way the world is and you awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws through learning, reflecting to independently verify and practice, you can train your mind to get to the point where you're only peaceful, you're only joyful, you don't have any bitterness and hostility, you don't have arguments in your relationships, and you can see that this is occurring because as you're gradually learning the teachings, you know situations where you were once angry and frustrated and agitated, and you experience those same situations and your mind doesn't experience those same feelings any longer because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. Usually, like I mentioned, I'll have a student read the chapter first, but this particular chapter I'm not going to have a student read because this is a core central teaching of the Buddha. I'm just going to explain a little bit of it to you. It normally takes me 2.5, 3 hours to explain this in detail because it's a core central teaching of the Buddha that in all of our foundational programs, I spend a good 2.5 hours walking students through this because it's a foundational program and students really need to know this. In terms of getting to enlightenment, this is the path to enlightenment. It's called the Eightfold Path. If you were interested in getting to enlightenment based on the teachings of the Buddha, you would need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. So here in the Pali Canon English study group, typically what I do, because students have already studied with me to a foundational level, is I just say, what questions do you have? We don't even read it because they've already studied it. But I know that most of you guys here, you haven't studied with me before because you're coming into the temple. Some of you go online, you guys have studied with me. Some of you guys here, you've studied with me. But most of you guys here haven't studied with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk you through a little bit of this rather than actually reading the entire thing. So the Buddha here is laying down this core central teaching where everything else plugs into it. And like I mentioned, you would need to know this in order to get to enlightenment, and you need to practice it. You learn it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and you practice it. What he's talking about is these 8 factors: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are like 8 things that you're dialing into your life closer and closer and closer. If you were trying to get a better quality sound out of a speaker system, you would have 8 dials that you would dial these speakers in, getting a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. And the same thing's true about your mind, that if you would like to get a better and better quality performing mind with focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory, if you're interested in having blossoming relationships where your relationships are at ease and you don't have difficulties and struggles any longer, you can dial these 8 dials into your life closer and closer, and your mind will perform more and more optimally. But you need to know what each one of them are, and that's why I spend a significant amount of time in the foundational courses to explain this. Here, this first one called right view. What this is doing is this is establishing what's called the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is referring to the Four Noble Truths. We studied the Four Noble Truths last week in this program. And then in other times I've taught the Four Noble Truths. Essentially, the first Noble Truth is explaining in detail. This isn't the detail. This is just the Buddha pointing to it in his Eightfold Path. The detail of the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is essentially sharing with you that everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. This is the problem that people experience. Their mind's going up and down and up and down. You're happy, you're excited, you're elated, you're thrilled, but then it's only a matter of time before you're sad, you're frustrated, you're agitated, you're annoyed, you're stressed, you're feeling anxiety. And then sometimes you feel bored or lonely, or you're shy or resentful or jealous. And you have these feelings where the mind's going up and down and up and down. While most people just kind of assume that this is the human condition and they just accept that, hey, I'm going to just experience this. And oftentimes people are blaming other people for the feelings that you're experiencing. In reality, it's your own mind that is causing these feelings. That's what the second noble truth is helping you to understand. That the second noble truth is explaining to you that the cause of these feelings is craving, desire, attachment. The mind is longing and yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. Again, oftentimes we blame other people for the feelings that you experience. You might adamantly believe that mom and dad are making you angry, or your brothers and sisters are frustrating you, or your coworkers or your boss is annoying you. This isn't actually true. And as long as you keep believing that, you're not going to ever solve the problem, because what you'll end up doing is you'll push people away thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But it doesn't solve the problem when you push people out of your life, because you just get angry and frustrated, irritated over and over and over again. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people, almost like an animal growling and roaring and showing its teeth at another animal, trying to fear another animal to do things its way. Well, you're a human being. You don't need to growl and roar and show your teeth in order to get people to do things your way. Instead, you can just understand that everybody has a different way of doing things, and there isn't just one fixed way of doing things. So if you think that other people are causing you to be angry, you might vent your anger at people through your aggression and hostility and bitterness and resentfulness. Or you might put your expectations on people, and you might try to control them to get things done your way. This is the craving, the desire, the attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way. And the unfortunate thing is you can't get things your way all the time. It's very unfortunate that not everything's going to go your way. This is the universal truth of impermanence, that sometimes you're going to get what you want, but sometimes you're not. And as long as your mind is craving to always get things done a certain way, and you want everybody in the world to do things a certain way, when they do things your way, you'll be happy. But when they don't, you'll be frustrated and you'll be agitated and you're annoyed because your mind's not getting what you want. So for example, if it's sunny outside, you might be so happy and excited. But then when it rains, you'll be sad, you'll be frustrated. Or if your bank account balance is here, you might be happy and excited. But then when it goes down here, you'll be frustrated and annoyed. This is your mind having craving, desire. It's craving for permanence, wanting things to be a certain way. And you live in an impermanent world. This is the thing, is that the mind craves this permanence, wanting things to be permanent, but yet you live in an impermanent world. Everything around you is impermanent. But the mind in the unenlightened state lacks that wisdom, so it keeps craving permanence and wanting things to be a certain way. This is the cause of your anger and your sadness and your frustration. And you can independently verify this. As I shared with you, there's no beliefs in the teachings of the Buddha. You can look at a recent situation where you've been angry and frustrated and agitated, and you can see that if you would have gotten what you wanted in that situation, you would have been happy. You would have been excited. You would have been elated. But you didn't get what you want, so you were frustrated and angry and irritated. Again, we'll typically try to blame somebody else when we lack wisdom of these natural laws, but you can awaken. What it means to awaken is to cultivate wisdom. You can cultivate wisdom of true reality and see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And the beauty in this is if you can see that your mind is causing these feelings, then you can actually eliminate them. Whereas if everybody else is causing these feelings, you can't do anything. You're going to be frustrated the rest of your life because everybody else is causing you to be angry. And you might feel like you want to go around the world and teach other people to do things your way. But this isn't going to work because there's 8 billion people in the world, and you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. So when you come to true reality and realize that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, the beauty in this is that you can eliminate them because it's your own mind that's actually causing them. And that's what the third noble truth is explaining to you, is that the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And then the fourth noble truth, the Buddha explains that the way to eliminate discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. That's the complete perfect plan that's going to help you and guide you to eliminating your discontentedness. And that's what this is, the Eightfold Path. So here you can see in right view, the Buddha is explaining, or at least pointing to the Four Noble Truths. And then in his other teaching in the Four Noble Truths, he explains to you what the Four Noble Truths are. So the entire path to enlightenment is based on establishing right view. What right view is understanding that your mind is causing your own discontent feelings, that craving, desire, attachment is causing this. Because if you have wrong view, you will blame other people for your feelings, and you will never be able to solve this. You'll never be able to eliminate your anger and sadness and frustration because you're looking in the wrong place, that other people aren't causing your mind to experience these feelings. So the path to enlightenment starts with a deep understanding of what is the problem, what is the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And this is what I usually spend a good 2.5 hours walking people through the entire Eightfold Path. It takes me usually about 45 minutes to an hour just to explain right view. But here I've just given it to you in a little bit of a summary format. Then once you establish right view, you move on to right intention, and you start developing right intention. These are 3 intentions or thinking or thoughts: renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness, where you develop the thinking or the thought or the intention of renunciation to practice non-ill will and harmlessness. What renunciation is willingness to let go and give up your unwholesomeness, to give up your false beliefs. There are certain beliefs that you have in your mind right now that are not true. And when you have belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because either you convinced yourself to believe it or somebody else convinced you to believe it. The teachings of the Buddha have no beliefs whatsoever. Instead, what you're doing is you're learning, like I mentioned, intellectually understanding, you're reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing. And one of the first things that you need to let go of and eliminate, practicing this intention of renunciation, is your belief that somebody else is causing you to be angry. You're going to need to eliminate that. But as long as you hold on to that belief that somebody else is making you angry, you'll never solve your problem. So that's why the Buddha starts off the path helping you to understand there's certain things you're going to need to let go of. There's certain wisdom that you don't have in your mind. There's certain false beliefs that your mind is holding on to. And if you're not willing to let those go, keep an open mind and learn new things, you'll never be able to solve your problem. So that's why he starts that from the very beginning. And then there's the intention of non-ill will, which is the same thing as saying the intention of goodwill or loving kindness. Because as long as you have ill will in your mind, you're going to be interested in causing harm to other beings. And that's the second or the third part, is the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested and incapable of causing harm to other beings. Because anytime you put harm out, this harm is going to come back to you. This is the natural law of Gama, or karma, some people call it. The natural law of Gama is a word from the Pali language, where karma is from the Sanskrit language. This isn't anything mystical or magical. It's nothing to believe in. It's not punishments and rewards. What it is it's a natural law that's showing you certain causes leads to a certain effect, or certain actions lead to a certain result. Essentially, certain decisions, either wise or unwise, are going to lead to either wholesome results or unwholesome results. When you make a wise decision, it's going to produce wholesome Gama, or wholesome results. And when you make unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome Gama, or unwholesome results. So if you were interested in going around and causing harm to others, would be the opposite of what the Buddha is teaching you here. But if you have that intention to cause harm to others, this harm is just going to come back to you. So if through your speech and your actions and your livelihood, if you were to cause harm to others, this harm just comes back to you. So the Buddha sets you up at the beginning to help you understand that you need this intention of goodwill, this intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested in causing harm to other beings. But then, of course, you need to know the wisdom of how to not cause harm to other beings. And that's what he shares in the next 3 sections. Here, under right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And this goes deeper. Here, he's just giving you a summary and kind of pointing to it. But here, what he's teaching you is how to not cause harm to others. He's not teaching you rules or commandments. He's not trying to force you to do anything. It's up to you to be able to see the truth that, when you've lied in the past, it was unwise and it caused harm and you experienced unwholesome results. If you've done any gossiping or slander where you're damaging other people's reputation, this causes harm. Same thing when you're harsh and bitter and hostile through your speech. You can see where you've done that. You've experienced broken relationships, and you've experienced people arguing and being bitter and hostile with you. You've been in fights and arguments because of your harshness. And this is just the mind having a lack of wisdom and not being trained to understand how to speak gentle in all situations. And then there's frivolous speech, which is like idle chatter, just talking, yada, 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 yada. It's almost like broadcasting. It's not a conversation. So if you've ever done that where you've just been like yada, 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 someone's like, oh my goodness, when is this person going to be quiet? When am I going to get a chance to talk? Right? So you need to have a conversation with people instead of broadcasting. So the Buddha is teaching you how to speak in ways that would be wise. And it goes deeper than what you see here. This is just a beginning teaching. And then he teaches you not to cause harm with your bodily actions, not to cause harm through your livelihood. What a livelihood is, the way you sustain your life. And again, this goes a lot deeper that I usually go into details. Then there's the mental discipline section, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This goes really deep, where the Buddha is explaining to you how to discipline the mind and how to train the mind. And like I mentioned, you would need to be able to walk through and learn this. In volume 1, chapter 4 and 5, I explained this in detail in the book. And I've also taught many classes that have been recorded to be able to help you learn this. If you're interested in eliminating your anger and your sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, there's help for you. There's resources, there's books, there's personal guidance, there's all this help for you. Because essentially what the teachings of the Buddha are, is it's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. Right? It's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. But what's hurting you is inside your own mind. It's not the outside world. Oftentimes people perceive it that way when they lack wisdom. They think the outside world is causing them to be painful. But in reality, it's within your own mind. That's why the Buddha was able to get to peace and joy. That's why people today are able to get to the peace and joy of the enlightened mind, because you train your mind. You train the inner world. You don't need to fix the outer world. You just need to train the inner world. Okay, so I'm going to see if you guys have any questions here. You're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like about anything that I've shared here. Again, this is just a very basic, simple teaching that I've shared and kind of introduced you to the Eightfold Path, but it goes a lot deeper than this, and that's what you would ultimately need to be able to learn. So is there any questions that you guys have here on the Eightfold Path? Remember, those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Oh, you have a question, Rex? Sure. So Rex asked for this one, right? Concentration. This is explaining the jhanas, the 4 preliminary phases that the mind experiences before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. But when he talks about practicing concentration, he talks about this in other places, which is meditation and practicing singleness of mind. But this is the result of having put together the entire Eightfold Path, that you experience these preliminary phases of the jhanas, and that's what he's talking about here. Okay. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions here. So what I'm going to do is move into the next chapter, which is chapter 12. And this is where we'll do what we normally do, which is I'll invite someone to read. Looks like Pat would like to read. After Pat reads, I'll share some teachings on that, and then I'll open up to any questions you guys have. And as you get these microphones, you can just keep them with you, because you might have a follow-up question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can share the microphone with them. So yes, sir.
The world would not lack for arahants. In whatever teachings and discipline the Noble Eightfold Path is not found, no aesthetic is found of the first, the second, the third, or the fourth grade. But such ascetics can be found of the first, second, third, and fourth grade in a teachings and discipline where the Noble Eightfold Path is found. Now, Subhata, in these teachings and discipline, the Noble Eightfold Path is found, and in it are to be found ascetics of the first, second, third, and fourth grade. These other schools are lacking of true ascetics, but if in this one the monks were to live the life of perfection, the world would not lack for arahants.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So what an arahant is this is an enlightened being. This is how they refer to enlightened beings during the lifetime of the Buddha. They've eliminated all the 10 fetters in the mind. These 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered, he provides you the tools and techniques of how to eliminate these pollutions. And as you're doing so, this is where the peace and the joy comes into the mind. So what the Buddha's sharing here is that if the Eightfold Path isn't learned and practiced, if it isn't part of the collection of teachings that you're learning, it's not going to lead to enlightenment. It's not going to lead to the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment. Here it's being referred to as a grade, but he refers to these as stages as well. There's 4 individual stages. Arahant is where the mind is actually enlightened, where all 10 fetters have been eliminated from the mind, and you'll see that there's the peace, the calmness, the serenity, and the contentedness with joy. And today we would refer to this person as an enlightened being, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to them as an Arahant. The first stage of enlightenment is referred to as a stream enterer. The second stage is called a once returner. The third stage is a non-returner. And then the fourth stage is an arahant. And it would be the Eightfold Path that you would be learning and practicing and developing in order to be able to get to one of those 4 stages of enlightenment. And as you're making your way through these 4 stages, you'll notice this decrease of your discontentedness. Getting in even to the first stage of enlightenment, you'll notice this significant decrease that where in the past you would get angry and frustrated and agitated and annoyed. By the time you get to that first stage of enlightenment, there's been this significant decrease in your discontentedness. It's just a mere fraction of what it once was. And then as you progress through to the 4th stage of enlightenment, ultimately you'll completely eliminate all your discontentedness. You might think that during the lifetime of the Buddha, that he was the only person that was teaching. Because if there was a Buddha alive during your lifetime, you'd probably be interested in learning directly from a Buddha, right? And the thing is, though, that a Buddha isn't distinguished by any kind of physical characteristic. They don't go around performing a bunch of miracles to try to convince people of who they are and what they have done. Instead, they just share their teachings with others to be able to help people to be able to get to enlightenment. So not only was the Buddha teaching, and some people knew that he was a Buddha, some people didn't, but there were other people who were teaching as well. There were plenty of people who were claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But the Buddha knew that that wasn't true, that it was his teachings that led to enlightenment. And that's why he consistently shared them into the world so that more and more people could learn them. So here, what he's sharing with this student is he's saying, hey, these other schools are lacking of true ascetics or true ordained practitioners or true monks. That's what an ascetic is. But if somebody would like to live this life to perfection, by learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, then there won't be a lack of enlightened beings. It would be the Eightfold Path that's going to guide people to enlightenment. And that's what I was sharing with you previously. So any questions on this chapter that you guys have here? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one. By the way, what you have in these chapters is you have the words of the Buddha. That's what these are here. And you see he teaches very clear, very concise, and very precise, right? This is the way a Buddha speaks, is very clearly, because his mind's free of pollution and he can speak very clear and very precise. So you have his words in each one of these chapters. Then you have the reference. This takes you back to the original source teachings in the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is 45 volumes of books that are about this large, and this is the complete collection of what we still have available of the teachings of the Buddha. It's the largest, most complete collection. This book series is an extract, that it's extracted certain teachings from that Pali Canon. And then what you have under that is you have words from me to provide you some reflections and some guidance that will help you to be able to integrate these teachings into your life. As I mentioned, the Buddha teaches very clear, very concise, and very precise. But it helps to have a teacher and a guide, someone who understands the totality of the teachings of the Buddha, to be able to guide you through your learning and growing. But you're never believing. Like I mentioned, you're learning, investigating, you're reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing. So that's what's being explained here to you. And then each chapter is set up that way. So this is chapter 13. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Steve. For those of you guys that English is your second language, this is a great time to practice your English, do a little reading. Even for those of you guys that English is your first language, this is a good chance to practice some reading and cultivating understanding of English.
The difference between the Tathagata and a monk liberated by wisdom. Monks, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, liberated by non-clinging through a fading away of strong feelings towards from, through its fading away and elimination, is called a perfectly enlightened one. A monk liberated by wisdom, liberated by non-clinging through a fading away of strong feelings towards form, through its fading away and elimination, is called one liberated by wisdom. The Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, liberated by non-clinging through a fading away of strong feelings towards feeling, perception, volitional forms, choices, decisions, consciousness, through its fading away and elimination, is called a perfectly enlightened one. A monk liberated by wisdom, liberated by non-clinging through a fading away of strong feelings towards feeling, perception, volitional forms, choices, decisions, consciousness, through its fading away and elimination, is called one liberated by wisdom. Therein, monks, that what is the distinction? What is the disparity? What is the difference between the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, and a monk liberated by wisdom? The Tathagata, monks, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, is the originator of the path unarisen before, the producer of the path unproduced before, the declarer of the path undeclared before. He is the knower of the path, the discoverer of the path, the one skilled in the path. And his disciples now reside practicing that path and become possessed of it afterwards. This, monks, is the distinction, the disparity, and the difference between the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, and a monk liberated by wisdom.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is explaining the difference between him being a Buddha and an average enlightened being. Getting to enlightenment would be wonderful for you. You would experience peace and joy. You would no longer experience bitterness and hostility. You would have focus and concentration and all these benefits that I've been talking about. But there's something called a Buddha. A Buddha is a very unique and rare individual in the world. Sometimes you might go places where people will tell you that everyone's a Buddha and that you're a Buddha. But the Buddha didn't teach this. This is not something that the Buddha actually taught. Here you can see that the Buddha is drawing this distinction between him and an average enlightened being. An average enlightened being is getting to enlightenment through cultivating wisdom. They train their mind with the help of teachers and guides, and they can cultivate that wisdom. They can train their mind, and they can get to enlightenment. But they're not a Buddha at that point. A Buddha, as you see here in the words of the Buddha, is the discoverer of the path, the declarer of the path. He's the one who figured it out on his own without the help of any teachers or any guides. This is the first criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. And here he's referring to himself as the Tathagata. The word Tathagata means the discoverer of truth, or the person who shares truth, or the one who discerns truth, right? This is what a Tathagata is. And a Buddha is the person who's discovered the path to enlightenment. They don't have any teachers. They don't have any guides. Then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those independently discovered teachings with countless people during their life. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after that person's death. So these are the three criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. And the Buddha is talking about one of those criteria here of he's the discoverer, the declarer of the path, undeclared before him. And you can see that here, that he didn't teach that everyone is an actual Buddha. And there's other teachings which I shared last week where he talks about how rare it is that a Buddha actually exists in the world. The last Buddha that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And now the world isn't currently aware of anybody that has existed since his time frame that was an actual Buddha. So he is the discoverer, the declarer, the originator of the path. He doesn't have any teachers or guides. He taught from the age of 35 into the age of 80. He dedicated 45 years of his life to be able to share the teachings and helping countless people get to enlightenment during his lifetime. Then he preserved the teachings in such a way that countless more people got to enlightenment after his death. And this is the three main criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. Any questions here on this chapter? Yeah, you have a question, Roxanne? Go for it. Pat's got a mic there that he's going to share with you.
I know that in the teachings there were a lot of different people around the Buddha during his time. But some of the wording in here is like, makes it sound as if you need to be a monk in order to become enlightened.
This isn't true. You don't have to be a monk to get to enlightenment. He's oftentimes talking to monks, but you'll see other teachings as well where he's talking to household practitioners. So oftentimes when he was in a group of people, he would be addressing the ordained practitioners, but there would be household practitioners there too. His monks were the closest students, where household practitioners during his lifetime, they were really busy with just sustaining their life. Think about like water. It would take them all day just to carry water from the well to their house and fill up their house with water. And they might have to do that 2 or 3 times a week just to get water. It's kind of lost on us how convenient we have it. We just turn a spigot and boom, we got water. But life wasn't always that way. And then in terms of food, it's really easy. We can go outside, go to a restaurant, boom, we can have food in about, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, pretty easily. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, it wasn't so easy to get food and clothing and all these other things. So household practitioners were oftentimes very busy just sustaining their life, growing crops and harvesting crops and things like this. So it was people leaving the household that would study with him. They spent 100% of their time learning and practicing to get to enlightenment. These people were oftentimes getting to enlightenment, but household practitioners got to enlightenment during his lifetime too. Nowadays, I would say that household practitioners have a much better ability to get to enlightenment today, even than during the lifetime of the Buddha, because you have so much time in your life. That's why you guys can come here and you can have a holiday, or you can spend time at the temple, and you even do things like surfing social media. You fill up your day with unbeneficial things because you have so much time in your life that you just sit around and maybe do unbeneficial things because you have so much time. Where during the lifetime of the Buddha, this wasn't the case. People were actively busy just trying to sustain their life. This was 2,500 years ago. So a household practitioner can definitely get to enlightenment. You'll see some people that will tell you that only ordained practitioners can get to enlightenment, but this isn't actually true. There's some people that will tell you only men can get to enlightenment and women can't get to enlightenment. It's not true. Some people will tell you if you prefer same-gender relationships that you can't get to enlightenment. This isn't true, right? There's nothing that supports that whatsoever, because the mind is the same, whether it's a man or a woman, whether you're wearing white clothes or brown pants or an orange robe. The mind is exactly the same for all these individual human beings. So the teachings that it takes to be able to train your mind to get to enlightenment, it's not based on your lifestyle and whether you live at a monastery or not. It's about, do you have the inner discipline to dedicate time to learning and growing and developing on the path? Do you have inner discipline to train your mind in meditation each day? Do you have access to the teachings to be able to learn them and understand them? These are the kind of things that are going to contribute to your enlightenment. And one of the things that I will oftentimes point out to people to help them understand that household practitioners can surely get to enlightenment is, we know that the Buddha was very wise, right? He was very smart, very wise. 2,500 years ago, he had a tremendous amount of wisdom. Well, wise individuals only do things that are beneficial and going to be helpful. He's not going to waste his time, for example, because he's only got a certain amount of time to share his teachings into the world. Well, if household practitioners couldn't get to enlightenment, he wouldn't teach them, right? Because it would be a waste of his time. Because the way a Buddha thinks is the best way to ensure their teachings continue in the world is to help more and more and more people get to enlightenment. Because once you get to enlightenment, you'll never forget the teachings that it took for you to actually get to enlightenment. So if a Buddha is interested in seeing their teachings continue in the world, they would need to get many, many people to get to enlightenment, and countless people get to enlightenment. Then the wisdom would exist in the world in order for it to continue on in the world. So if he was teaching household practitioners, it wouldn't actually, and they couldn't get to enlightenment, he would be wasting his time, right? And then also another thing, a third thing, is that his goal would be a goal of a Buddha, and what is well known is that the entire world, it has the ability to get to enlightenment. Jesus Christ would have called this heaven on earth, right? To have everybody enlightened. Well, if everybody was ordained, who would be running the world, right? We wouldn't have any taxi drivers. We wouldn't have any airplane pilots. We wouldn't have, we wouldn't have farmers. We wouldn't have anybody because everyone would be ordained, right? So household practitioners can definitely get to enlightenment, but this is a misunderstanding that you will see in the world. But you can see in his teachings, if you study throughout this book series, where he talks about how everybody can get to enlightenment. But in this particular teaching, you don't see that, but in the other teachings, he does share that. Any other questions you guys would like to ask on this one? I'm going to check online here, see if we have any questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online either. So let's go to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this one? This is a very short one, chapter 14. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. Maybe you get the next one. Roxanne will do this one and you get the next one. Yeah.
The spiritual life is not lived for the sake of deceiving people. Monks, this spiritual life is not lived for the sake of deceiving people and persuading them, nor for the benefit of gain, honor, and praise, nor for the benefit of winning in debates, nor with the thought, let the people know me thus. But rather, this spiritual life is lived for the sake of restraint, abandoning, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination.
Okay, thank you, Roxanne. So what the Buddha is making a point here is the whole goal of the path to enlightenment is to eliminate your discontentedness, to eliminate the strong feelings. And as part of doing so, your mind's going to become very wise. You're going to become very smart. You're going to know things about the world that other people just don't know. And it's going to become very easy for you to navigate the world, understand the world, make wise decisions. Some of the most simplest things people will be struggling and having all kinds of difficulty with, but you'll know it and understand it, right? And as you're becoming more and more wise, there's the potential for your conceit to arise, the arrogance, the pride. Let the people know me thus, right? Let people know how smart I am and how intelligent I am. And the Buddha is saying that's not the goal of this path. The goal isn't for people to honor you and praise you. It's not to gain things. It's not to go out in the world and make money from all the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. The whole goal of this path is for you to eliminate your discontent feelings, to eliminate the anger, the sadness, the frustration, all those strong feelings. So if somebody was learning these teachings just because they want to appear smart to other people, they want this honor and respect, they're trying to gain money from other people, that's not the reason why to learn and practice these teachings. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see, to remain humble. You need to be able to remain humble, because as your mind's becoming wiser and wiser, you might notice that conceit starts to arise in the mind, and you would like to keep that at bay. You ultimately need to eliminate your ego, eliminate the arrogance in order to get to enlightenment. And at any time that you see your arrogance and pride, you're trying to judge other people and look down on people or look up to people. Maybe you think that you're above people and you look down on them, or maybe you're below, feel like you're below people and you look up to them and you feel less of a person. This is because of the conceit. This is the measuring and comparing, looking at other people and judging them. You're going to need to train your mind to think of everybody as equal and be humble. So this is what the Buddha is bringing to your attention, that the ultimate goal is to eliminate your discontentedness. So any questions on this one? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So, I'm sorry. Steve, you have a question? Yeah.
I don't know, a question, just an observation that this, for the spiritual life, for the benefit of gain, honor, praise, winning debates. I guess like a lot of people, I spend a lot of time surfing YouTube, on spiritual stuff over the years. And there's a lot of that on YouTube, this spiritual teacher, and, oh, by the way, press the like button and the debates, and you can find yourself getting involved with that. And also, as a result of that, I've gone through periods of just having a cup of coffee with people, and then finding myself regurgitating some of this stuff, trying to say, oh, I know this author, or I know that guy. Mm. And it does become, it creates unease afterwards, I've found. So I don't know if that's a question, but just that we're living in this world where we're sort of bombarded by spiritual teachers, Yeah.
Yeah, the Buddha is teaching you how to get to that peace and the joy. And if you're going around trying to convince other people how wise you are and what you know about these teachings, this is coming from the craving. This is coming from the ego. And that's why you get agitated and annoyed and frustrated in those situations. So what you would like to do is just navigate the world, have a conversation. If somebody's interested in asking you about the teachings of the Buddha, share it with them, right? But this debating, which sometimes you see in some temples, they will debate each other. Not here in Thailand, but in other places, you will oftentimes see people debating about what are the true teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha didn't teach debate. He didn't teach to argue and fight and all these kinds of things. So it's not about winning in debate. It's not about looking so great in front of other people. You would like to just humbly practice the teachings because it's your practice and you're training your mind. And that's what's going to help you eliminate conceit or arrogance and pride, to be able to just focus on eliminating your strong feelings, that discontentedness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry, can you use the mic, Pat?
Believe that further on in this, a couple of chapters coming up, it distinctly just talks about discussion and or not to discuss as opposed to debate.
Yes. Yeah, he talks about discussion and having discussions rather than argumentative speech. Yeah, this is what the Buddha teaches. Yeah, whenever you're arguing, like here we're talking about the teachings of the Buddha, but let's relate this to something that you might be more akin to talking about, like politics, right? If you went around thinking that the goal is for you to debate people about politics, and when you get together at a family event or a social event, you're debating politics, that's not going to be very fun, right? You're just going to be in arguments. You're going to get angry. You're going to get frustrated. Other people are going to get angry at you. No reason. Like, whatever you think about politics, just keep that to yourself unless somebody asks you. Right? If someone's like, hey, what do you think about this? You could share it with them, but share it in a humble way where you're not holding on to it and you're wanting to convince other people to do things. When you're trying to convince other people to do something, if they do what you want, you'll be happy. But if they don't do what you want, you'll be sad and frustrated. I was just talking to a student yesterday, and he invited me to come to California, and he's going to potentially sponsor me to fly to California and teach some teachings. And he says, but before we make it final, I need to convince my wife, right? And I said, no need to convince your wife. I said, just ask her. And if she says yes, wonderful, we'll go forward and we'll make the plan. And if she says no, then you can figure out what you're going to do next. But if you try to convince somebody of something, it's like, trying to force somebody and putting pressure on this person. And you'll only be happy if you get what you want. And that person will feel pressured and forced, and they won't be interested in what it is that you're saying anyway. So you'll find that your mind will be much more at ease if you just maintain your wisdom and what it is that you have and understand, and you just walk through the world with a smile. And if people ask you, hey, why are you smiling so much? Oh, it's the teachings of the Buddha. Oh, what are those? Oh, here you go. Here's what they are, right? No need to go out and, try to convince other people of anything whatsoever, whether it's that you're a good person, you're a kind person, you're a friendly person. Sometimes you might feel like you have to go out and convince people that you're a good person. No, people are either going to see you as a good person or not based on their judgment. And if people look it down on you and people judge you in a negative way, probably not interested in spending time with that person anyway. If people look at you and they're like, wow, I really enjoy being with this person. This person is very friendly. Okay, great. Let's be friends. Come on. Let's have a good time together. Right? So sometimes we go out into the world thinking we need to convince other people of something. You can let that burden go. Just enjoy your life and make wise decisions. Yep. Okay, so let's go to the next chapter. Oh, we have a question here on Zoom. Let's see what somebody says. I can't read it because it's small print. Let's see. What do we got here? This is from Jay Atkins, I think. In the early stages of practicing right speech, intention, when confronted with challenges with actions that you know are correct, do you accept the direction, or is it ego to offer your opinion while you think that is the incorrect action? Actions you know are incorrect. I think you have answered Oh, okay. So you think I answered your question? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So oftentimes people think that there's this kind of like one right way or wrong way to do things in the world. And of course, your way is the right way, right? Your way is the right way, right? There's more than one right way to do things in the world. There's more than one wise way to do things. But oftentimes when our ego is in the mind, we think our way is the right way and everybody else is doing things the wrong way. And then when people do things the wrong way, which is opposite of you, you might get angry or frustrated. So if you drop all of that and don't think of things as right and wrong, that there's many different wise ways to do things in the world and that everyone's going to do things your way, and that's okay. That's one of the beautiful things about the world is we have different views, different opinions. We do things different ways. We're unique. This is impermanence. Then we can embrace it and we can be like, yeah, of course mom's doing something different than me because she has different opinions. She has different experiences. So she's going to make different decisions. Of course, my boss has a different opinion here. And that's actually really good. I would like to hear their opinion. Let me see what would be wise in this situation. So you can start appreciating people's opinions and views and understand that everyone's going to have different ways of doing things. And we don't have just one right way and then everything else is the wrong way. And then you can actually feel more comfortable when people are making decisions around you because you might disagree with their decision, but you can still love the person, right? Because everyone's going to have different decisions. And if you can only love people who do things your way, then you're not going to be able to love everyone in the world, right? So you can separate the decision that someone makes from the person themselves. And now you can love all beings, understanding that people are going to make different decisions. And that's okay. All right. All right, so thank you for your question there. It looks like we answered it. So we'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 4, I think, or 15. Let's see. Would somebody like to read this one? I think you were going to read it, right? Yeah, if you could get a microphone. We have a few of them around.
Yeah. Hello.
Oh. She's going to read. Okay.
Oh, hello. Both firmly and now what the Takata teaches is the discontentless and the elimination of discontentless. So saying monks so proclaiming, I have been baselessly, pointlessly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some ascetics and Brahmins. Thus, the ascetics Ascetic Gotama is one who leads astray. He teaches the obliteration, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. As I am not so as I do not proclaim, so I have been baselessly, pointlessly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some ascetics and Brahmins. Thus, the ascetic Gotama is one who leads astray. He teaches the obliteration, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. Monks both firmly and now what I teach is the discontentless and the elimination of discontentless. If others abuse, criticize, scold, and harass the Takata for that, the Takata on that account feels no annoyance, bitterness, or sadness of the mind. And if others honor, respect, appreciate, and venerate the Takata for that, the Takata on that account feels no happiness, excitement, or elation of the mind. If others honor, respect, appreciate, and venerate the Takata for that, the Takata on that account thinks thus. They perform such services as this for the sake of what had early come to be fully understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a short teaching, but it's actually really deep. There's actually 3 or 4 things here that the Buddha is teaching you to be able to understand. This first part, what he's talking about is during his lifetime, people were misrepresenting him because they didn't all understand his teachings. They were gossiping and they were slandering about him, right? If people were gossiping and slandering about the Buddha, you can be sure they're going to gossip and slander about you, right? So people were gossiping and slandering about the Buddha and saying that what he teaches is the extermination of an existing being. And he's saying, no, that's not what I teach. I don't teach the extermination of an existing being. What I teach is I teach the elimination of discontentedness. I teach what is discontentedness and its elimination. That's what he's teaching, is to eliminate conditioned feelings. Then he says, okay, if people basically hate him for that or criticize him for that, then he feels no annoyance, bitterness, or sadness. His mind's unaffected by how other people think about his teachings and what he chooses to do. But if people honor, respect, and appreciate him and venerate him for having shared these teachings, he doesn't feel any kind of happiness, excitement, or elation. His mind's unaffected no matter what people say. He's not experiencing conditional feelings. That based on the condition that somebody hates me, I'm going to be sad and angry and frustrated. Based on the condition that somebody loves me and honors me, I'm going to be happy and excited. This is what the unenlightened mind does. It goes up and down and up and down. But an enlightened mind doesn't experience that the mind is stable and steady. It's unshakable in these situations. So if somebody's being aggressive and hostile and bitter or hateful towards you, as an enlightened being, you wouldn't be affected by that. You wouldn't be bitter and hateful back to them. And then if somebody honors and respects you and cares deeply for you, you're not going to have this happiness and excitement either. So the Buddha is explaining that here. But then he comes to this teaching where he says, if others honor and respect him and appreciate him, the reason why is because they have come to fully understand his teachings, right? Because if you fully understand his teachings, your mind's enlightened. You're experiencing peace, calm, serenity, contentedness, and joy. You know your mind's enlightened because it's been many, many years that before you've ever experienced any discontentedness. You fully eliminated all your discontentedness. And if you fully understand his teachings, yeah, you're going to honor and respect him. You're going to appreciate him highly because you know what it feels like to be sad and angry and frustrated and all these other discontent feelings. And if you've trained your mind to the point where you don't experience that anymore, and you know it's these teachings that led to that, yeah, you're going to honor and respect him for sure. So that's what he's saying, that because when people do honor, respect, appreciate, and venerate him, the reason why is because they fully understand his teachings. Right? So either way, his mind's not affected. He's not affected whether people honor him or whether people disrespect him. He's unaffected. And this is the mind's training that you can accomplish. So in your life, like I was talking about earlier, if people are gossiping and slandering you, you can train your mind to be unaffected. If people are hateful and vindictive towards you, you can train your mind to be unaffected. You might still choose to not spend time with those people, but your mind would be unaffected by it. But then at the same time, when people really respect you a lot and they're so polite and kind and friendly, you can train your mind to be unaffected by that too. Because if you allow your mind to get so happy and excited when people respect you, then when people disrespect you, you're going to end up in the sadness and the frustration. Your mind's going to go up and down and up and down. And that experience of people honoring and respecting you, it's not permanent. Not everybody in the world is going to see you as a wonderful person, even the Buddha. Right? Not everybody sees him as a kind, wonderful person. Even today and even during his lifetime, there were people that hated him. There were people who tried to kill him during his lifetime, right? So you're going to experience these kinds of things in life. And if you can only be happy if everybody respects you and honors you, then you can't be happy all the time. So you can train your mind to be unaffected by these kinds of things. And part of this solution is to understand that when someone does respect you or somebody is polite and friendly and warm with you, don't get so happy and excited about that. Because waiting right around the corner, someone's going to be disrespectful and angry and bitter and hostile to you. And now you're going to be sad and frustrated because of it. So you can eliminate the craving for permanence and wanting everyone to respect you. And instead, just understand that there's a lot of impermanence in the world, and you're going to experience these situations in different times. There's going to be some people who love you and treat you wonderfully, and then there's going to be people who don't. And then you get to choose who you spend time with. And I would say that you would be interested in spending time with people that are treating you well, but you can't live in a bubble, right? You're not going to always live around people who are just treating you wonderful. You're going to encounter certain situations where people are doing unwise things. And this is understandable because of the way the world is, so that you can then train your mind to not form your inner feelings based on what other people are choosing to do. Because if you can only be happy when people around you are doing wonderful things, then you can't be happy all the time, because you're going to be around someone who does something unwise from time to time. Okay, so any questions on this chapter? This is chapter 15. You have a question? Yes, sir. If you can get a microphone. Just takes a second for it to come on. If you press the button, you just have to be patient and wait. There you go. It's working now.
It's all okay.
Yeah.
According to the previous content that we studied, I get tiny little questions because I don't think I got too much learning about this kind of thing. Is quite new for me. But I heard that since you follow this kind of rules and you want to reach a level of just get rid of those strong feelings and try to be calm in your heart. I want to ask a question that if you you follow these rules and you learn yourself, upgrading your mood, and eventually you got the elimination of your strong feelings, and your heart are just like a calm water surface, will it affect your ability to feel the emotions? Like you already like other people treat you well, other people treat you badly, and you don't feel bad or feel good, and then maybe sometimes you lose your feeling, or whether or not it will makes you to lose your feeling about feeling the emotions. And if someone lacks the ability of feeling emotion, is always so calm, will it be actually not a good things to live in this life? Because it seems like life will be quite without ripples, like no ripples on the water surface, something like that. I don't know whether or not I can express that precisely.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. So first, it's important to understand that these teachings aren't rules. There's no rules here, right? Because rules are like a doctrine that is set, and then there's somebody enforcing those rules. There's penalties if you don't follow the rules. This is like what a government sets up, right? They have rules. The teachings of the Buddha are not that. He's teaching you the natural laws of existence around you. And when you start to learn and understand that and you cultivate wisdom, now you can train your mind to experience enlightenment. Getting to enlightenment is not to follow rules, but to acquire wisdom. Now, having gotten to enlightenment, the mind is peaceful, it's calm, it's serene, it's content with joy. You're no longer experiencing what's called conditional feelings, where when this happens, I will be so happy. But then when this happens, I feel sad and miserable, right? So in this kind of situation, in the unenlightened state, the amount of time that you can be happy as your expectations grow and you want things to be a certain way, the amount of time that you can be happy becomes less and less and less and less. Because the idea of these things always being true and now you being happy is going to get harder and harder as your mind acquires more and more expectations. So by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind isn't just numb, right? This is how some people think when I talk about how you don't experience this conditional happiness, right? Because what conditional happiness is you're experiencing happiness based on the condition of this thing occurring, I will now be happy. But then when that condition isn't present, then I'll be sad. This is conditional feelings. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have unconditional happiness, unconditioned joy, where you're just always joyful, no matter what's going on. So the idea that someone's just flat, this is the way that people think because they can't fathom what enlightenment is like, to have unconditioned joy in the mind. They can't even fathom it. That they think that when we talk about elimination of happiness and excitement and elation, elimination of sadness and frustration, they're like, oh, that must be so mundane. That must be so boring. Actually, it's just the opposite. That getting to enlightenment, you've eliminated all the causes and conditions that are causing the mind to go up and down like this, but your mind is just always joyful. It's uplifted. No matter what's going on in your day-to-day life, no matter what's happening in the world, you can maintain your joy because you're not basing your inner feelings on some condition. That if there's no wars in the world, I will be happy. But as soon as there's a war, I will be sad. This is the unenlightened mind, that it's basing its inner feelings on some condition. And because you can't control the world, if you base your inner feelings based on the world, then you're going to just go up and down and up and down. So what you can do is you can train your mind and you can control your mind so that you can just always be joyful no matter what's going on. So you are eliminating conditional feelings, where based on some condition you will have a feeling. You're eliminating that. But that's not to say you're dull or mundane or boring. It's just the opposite. Your mind is just always uplifted because you've eliminated all the conditional pollutions in the mind. You experience unconditioned mental qualities. Instead of these conditional feelings, you're experiencing unconditional mental qualities, where your mind is just always uplifted and always joyful no matter what. Mm-hmm. If you could get the mic so that the people online can hear. Yeah, just give it a second.
Okay, so I think I already get your meaning about the unconditional happy, but I think maybe every joy or every uplifted things comes from somewhere. You say it comes from your heart. So where does this source of this joy or happiness comes from? Because since it's unconditional, but it must come just like the water comes out from the original place, like a mountain or something. This kind of joy, although it's unconditional, it may comes from somewhere. Just if you say it comes from your heart or come from yourself, so where does it actually come from? Or anything that could lead you to this kind of inner happiness or inner joy? I don't really understand where does it come from, because you must have a source of it.
Okay, so the reason why the mind isn't experiencing permanent happiness, the reason why the mind isn't experiencing permanent happiness is because of the pollutions that are in the mind. And when you have these pollutions in the mind, then you will experience the anger, the sadness, the frustration. Sometimes you'll be happy, sometimes you'll be sad, sometimes you'll be lonely, sometimes you'll be bored. This is because of the pollution that's in the mind. Those are the causes and conditions that are producing discontentedness or conditional feelings. When you eliminate these causes and conditions, when you get rid of these pollutions out of the mind, then the mind is now naturally in its natural state. It's unconditioned, that it no longer has the pollutions in the mind. So the mind is just joyful. It's like the sun is always there. It's always on. But when the clouds are in front of the sun, you can't see the sun and you can't feel the sun. But when you get the clouds out of the way, now the sun can shine through. So it's the same thing as that your mind in the natural state is actually joyful. It's peaceful, it's calm. But when you've got these pollutions in there, you can't experience that. So when you get rid of the pollutions, when you remove those clouds, now the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind can shine through. There's no source of that happiness. That's what's called unconditional happiness. And because there's no condition that is producing it, that's why you can't eliminate it. That by the time you get to this unconditioned happiness and unconditioned joy, it's permanent. The light is always on. You're always joyful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I thought you had a question about this one. That's why I went backwards, because you said the last one. So it looks like we should go to the next chapter, which is chapter 16. Is there someone who would like to read this? I think, yeah, you were planning to read. You've been very patient. Thank you.
From the night he fully awakened monks until the night he attains final nibbana, final enlightenment. In this interval, whatever he speaks, talks of, and explains, all that is just so, not otherwise. Therefore he is called the Tathagata. As he speaks, monks, so he does. As he does, so he speaks.
Okay, thank you so much. This is actually a teaching from one of his students after the Buddha died. When the Buddha died, one of his students said this. He said, from the night that he fully awoke, meaning from the time he got to enlightenment until the time he died, that's what final enlightenment is the actual death. We don't call it death for someone who got to enlightenment. We call it final enlightenment, because this is where the body and the mind finally separate, and now the mind is fully enlightened, or enlightened. It's called final enlightenment. What they're saying is, whatever he spoke of from the time he got to enlightenment at the age of 35 until the time that he died at the age of 80, all he taught, all he did was help people get to enlightenment. That's essentially what they're saying here, is that he's called the Tathagata because he's one who discovered the truth, one who shares the truth. And he shared that truth for 45 years. And that's what they had said at the time of his death, that the Buddha delivered his last words, he died, and then somebody said this, that they said, hey, from the time that he got to enlightenment until the time he died, all he did was share the teachings of what it took to be able to get to enlightenment. Okay, so any questions here? Anything you guys would like to ask? Okay, let's see any questions here. So let's go to the next one, see what the next one is. All right, this will be a good one. We'll make this our last one for today. Would someone like to read this one? Yeah, sure.
The Tathagata speech. So to Prince, such a speech as the Tathagata knows to be untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, and which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to others. Such speech the Tathagata does not speak. Such a speech as the Tathagata knows to be true and correct, but unbeneficial, and which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to others. Such a speech the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech as Tathagata knows to be true, correct, and beneficial, but which is unwelcome and disagreeable to others. The Tathagata knows the time to use such speech. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, but which is welcome and agreeable to others. Such speech the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true and correct, but unbeneficial, and which is welcome and agreeable to others. Such speech the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true, correct, and beneficial, and which is welcome and agreeable to others. The Tathagata knows the time to use such speech. Why is that? Because the Tathagata has compassion for all beings.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. So the Buddha has multiple teachings about speech, because speech is one of the ways that you can harm, and any kind of harm that you put out, it comes back to you. So he teaches in the Eightfold Path, right speech. He teaches what's called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, which is a deeper level teaching from the Eightfold Path. And then he teaches here, this is an even deeper level teaching. At the Eightfold Path, he teaches to eliminate lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. This is what you would like to work on. Then in the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, he teaches to speak at the right time. What you say is true, you speak gentle, you speak beneficially, and with a mind of loving kindness. And I usually walk students through all of that, helping them understand the ins and outs of that and practicing that. But then now that you're moving into this program, now you're learning an even deeper level of teaching around speech. So if you've brought your practice up to the point where you're practicing the Eightfold Path and the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you'd also like to understand this teaching too. What he's saying here is if something's untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, which means it doesn't even meet the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and it's unwelcome and disagreeable to others, he doesn't say it. No reason to say it, right? My grandmother used to say, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all, right? And that's what the Buddha's teaching you, but he's giving you much better detail than just grandma's teaching because he's the Buddha, right? So then he says, speech that he knows to be true and correct, but it's unbeneficial, and also it's unwelcomed and disagreeable to others. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say that because it's going to cause harm and there's no sense for him to say it. Then he says, okay, in such a situation where what he has to say is true, correct, and beneficial, right? So it meets the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, but it's unwelcomed and disagreeable to others, because sometimes you need to say things that are unwelcome and disagreeable to others. He says he knows the time to use such speech, right? You have to know the right time. That's part of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Then he says, okay, with speech that is untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, but it is welcomed and agreeable to others, right? Maybe profanity, right? It's maybe untrue, incorrect, and it's unbeneficial, but it's welcomed and agreeable. Maybe you're around people and they're speaking profanity left, right, backwards, and forwards. The Buddha says, I don't use that speech. I don't use that speech. I don't talk like that, right? Because it's untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial. So he doesn't say it, even though it's agreeable and welcomed by others. Here he says, if speech is true, correct, and unbeneficial, again, it doesn't meet the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and it's welcomed and agreeable to others, he doesn't say that speech. But then this last one, he says, when speech by the Tathagata is true, correct, and beneficial, and it's welcomed and agreeable to others, he knows the time to use such speech, right? You even need to be careful in these situations. Let's just say you praise your wife or your husband over and over and over again, or your children, right? It's maybe true, it's maybe correct, and maybe it's beneficial, and it's also welcomed and agreeable, but it can arise their ego in their mind when you overly praise somebody, right? So you need to know wisely, is it the right time to say this thing, right? So this is a deeper level teaching that you'd like to learn after you've already practiced the Eightfold Path with right speech and the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. So this is a deeper level of speech, understanding what is welcome and agreeable by others, and then choosing whether or not it's the right time to say that particular thing. And this is where you'll notice the beneficial results in your life, because not only is the Buddha teaching you to eliminate discontentedness from your own mind and eliminating the causes and conditions, but he's teaching you how to navigate the world of unenlightened beings. So if you're in a world where you're working on eliminating your ego, but people around you have ego, you might be talking in ways that arises their ego, and you would like to be aware of that and make sure that you're not talking in ways that allows people's minds to arise ego. Of course, if their ego arises, that's on them, but you can navigate the world in wise ways that ensures that there's less opportunity for their ego to arise, for example. So there's ways that you can modify the way you speak in order to experience improved results in your life. Whereas if you're bitter and harsh and hostile and argumentative in your relationships, you're going to experience problems in these relationships. But if you train your mind to be calm and peaceful and joyful and speaking in wonderful ways in the way that the Buddha teaches through all of his teachings, this is where you'll see improved results in your relationships. And that's what I teach in all the foundational programs. So any questions here on this particular chapter, 17? Remember, this is from volume 2, which is titled Walking the Path with the Buddha. Volume 2, this is chapter 17. Okay, let me see if we have any questions online. Hello to everyone online. I see lots of people there through Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do here is just end our class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for joining our class today here at Wat Tung Yu. Thank you for joining online as well, for all of you guys that are joining there. Tomorrow is our group learning program. This is the foundational program where we use that first book of the book series and we walk students through this. We're in chapter 15. In this chapter, it's titled True Love, Love Without Attachment. This is where I'm going to teach you what true love is, because oftentimes people in the unenlightened state, they don't understand what true love is, and they're oftentimes practicing craving, desire, attachment, masquerading as love. If you have difficulties and bitterness and hostility in your relationships, and you're noticing broken relationships over and over in certain situations, this is because the mind doesn't yet understand true love and you're not yet practicing true love. If you feel like in certain situations that people don't love you and you feel unloved, this is because you're not understanding true love yet. So when you understand what true love is and you're practicing true love, you'll see that more and more people will practice love with you. And when people are practicing love with you, you'll be able to identify what it is. So this is going to help you to create harmonious relationships. Without understanding true love, you wouldn't be able to create harmonious harmonious relationships in your life. So I'm going to teach you this tomorrow as part of our class. So if you'd like to join, we start at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning here at the temple. And then I also teach at 9 p.m. from home. So no matter where you are in the world, there should be a live class for you. And if you don't attend the live class, it'll be recorded so you can watch it that way too, either on our YouTube channel, in our Facebook group, or on our podcast. So thank you guys for joining here, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Okay, be well. Take care. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.